I think the first one, just selfishly, I want to talk about is emotional regulation.
Definitely.
I told you, like, I flew in here today. I was in Miami, which is like, there was a hurricane last week. We missed it, but there was just a lot of turmoil and stress that I was going through with traveling. So just kind of preparing for this podcast, I was like, man, how do I make sure my emotions are properly regulated so that I can give my best to Moran and the audience? You've done some studies, obviously, around this. So you've done studies where there were people going through neurosurgery and you tested their ability to control their emotions. What did you learn about how people can better control their emotions?
So I'll give you the premise of the patients we worked with, so everyone who's listening to us would know that it's not something you should try at home. The patients we studied are actually people who have brain surgery. So that's the kind of precondition.
Yeah.
And then we open their brain, put electrodes inside, stick those electrodes in the part of their brain that has to do with emotion, and then give them feedback from their emotions area when they feel something. And then we tell them, now you hear sounds that correspond to your emotions, learn to control the sounds. And the cool thing about that is that it's the first time and the only time in these people's lives and anyone's lives where emotions are not happening to us, but under our full control. So most of us, we can control if we raise our right hand or left hand. This is fully under our control, but getting sad is something that kind of happens to us. We control the inputs, but then we just get sad. It's not like you're saying, you know, my mom is sick. I should turn sadness for a second. Click, sadness for like 5 minutes. Okay, time to turn it off. So this setup was how we studied emotion regulation. And then what we learned is that there are actually a variety of options that work for different people, and every person should find their kind of niche within those. But they have to do with either reframing, that's one thing, which is basically for some people the best mechanism, and that is just telling a different story. So you see the situation flying, getting nervous and so on, and you just learn to call it something else. This is something that a lot of basketball players are really good at. A friend of mine interviewed basketball players who play a tight game when it's like the last 5 seconds and it's tie. And you're getting the ball and you're throwing it, and if it's in, you're going to win, and if it's not, you're going to lose. So kind of like a
big
moment.
pressure situation.
And this person asked them kind of, did you feel nervous? And they all categorically said, no, I wasn't nervous at all. I was excited. And when he tried to kind of probe and understand what's going on, turns out that if you look at the bodily experience of being nervous and being excited, it's almost the same. Pupils dilate, heart rate is elevated, skin is a little bit more sweaty. So what they learned is to call the same feeling excited, whereas someone else would call it nervous. So you're flying your airplane, it's rattling because of the winds. You can say, I'm panicked, or you can say, I'm excited, I'm energized, I'm kind of curious, and so on. So that's strategy number one. You basically learn to start renaming the same feeling something else. And it's starting as a mechanical thing and quickly becomes a neuro thing. Like you actually change your experience of that. So that's one. I'll give you one more because there's a variety. Yeah. Another one that we learned works really, really well is talk about the feelings with someone else and have them intervene. Doesn't matter what I say really, just have to give you a different perspective and then wrap it up and do it again a day after, 3 days after, 4 days after. So you had a bad breakup, your girlfriend dumped you and you're feeling miserable. You go to a friend and you tell them, ask me what happened. And then you open it up and you just tell them the story. This experience of telling the story isn't just a mechanical thing. You actually move memories from one part of the brain to another in order to tell a story. You basically load the memory and you have to move it somewhere else. And then by doing that, you expose it to new information. And if the friend or the therapist or someone gives you a new perspective, they say, you know, when I experienced this thing, this is what I did. Or I remember you telling me the same story a year ago and you moved on. Whatever they say would leak in, and then your version of that will be overwritten and you have a new version. And if you do it 3 or 4 times, you can actually change your emotions. It takes a few days, so it's not kind of as fast as, okay, I'm feeling sad now, I'm going to feel happy. But if you're dealing with something really, really bad, that's a good way to do it.
So that's like a hack of getting over a breakup if you ever...
breakup, trauma. Sometimes it's useful for kind of seeing a situation that you really don't like in a different lens. It's amazing how it works. And if you practice it one and you see that it worked for you, then you have a tool in your arsenal that you can use again and again. So I think people need to try once, see if it works for them. And if so, you have it.
So go through that again. So you're going through a breakup, let's say, or you had a car accident.
Yeah.
Do you have to explain that to someone else, and then they have to what part of that is helping you rewrite the story?
There need to be an external entity, just because if we try to do it ourselves, our brain doesn't really do the full loading. We basically know the full story, so we kind of jump to the end. We need to have a second person who's not us, who's hearing us and asks us, tell me the story. Therapists are the classical one. What is a therapist? They come to a meeting with you and they ask you, tell me what happened. So you load the story, move it to a different part of the brain, and you speak it. And you tell the therapist, she was such nasty woman. I hated her. And she said this. And the therapist, first of all, hears you. And this hearing you is important. It makes your brain go through the entire story, process it in the same linear version, and basically see it in your mind. Then you broadcast. Now, when you do it, it's actually exposed. Telling a story makes it sit in cache memory and be open. And then ideally, the other person gives you some exposure to the new information. Maybe they say, that's so sad. As simple as that. Maybe they say, I've had a similar experience. Whatever it is, the new information that they give you will leak into the version of the story that you have. And then when you're done with the 1 hour session with the therapist or with the 20-minute session with your friend, the memory is going to be locked with the new information and it's going to overwrite the original. And having told it and having seen some version of it through a different lens will mean that it's going to be changed. This is change number one, like a telephone game. You do it 5 times. It's very different than the original. You still remember that she dumped you, but now the feelings about that are very different.
Right. So you're almost changing the story in your mind using someone else that can kind of play that back to you. Or you just want to make sure that person that you're speaking to is like a helpful person, right? If they're giving you new information that you didn't even think about and it's not serving you, you're like, oh,
ideally,
come on.
It shouldn't be someone who's going to say, yeah, you deserve it.
Yeah, you suck.
But even a person that doesn't give you very helpful kind of insights is still helpful in that they force you to tell the story and see it from a different perspective. So teaching a class, for instance, as a professor, I'm saying it, is the best way to learn something. Why? Because I have to broadcast, but I have to kind of look at my audience and say, well, did this sentence land? Probably not. Let's try a different one. And it kind of forces you, they don't say a word, they just sit there and look at you, but they give you feedback and it forces you to think of different ways to communicate it. And it basically forces you to see the story already in different angles when you tell it.
Yeah. This one makes me think about, this is a little bit like off topic, but John Jones, who's known as one of the greatest UFC fighters or MMA fighters. He was asked a question when he was at the hype of his career, and he was asked if he feels fear before he goes into any fight. And he says, I do feel fear. But the difference between me and everyone else is that I can use my fear and I can turn it into excitement. Fear is this fireball that can either work against you, it can burn you to the ground, or for the people that are elite, you can use it as a fireball that you can use to throw it against your enemy.
I think martial arts is kind of like that. Many martial arts are basically saying, take the strength of the attack from your opponent and just twist it so it kind of comes back to them. I don't remember if it's like karate or judo, but one of them literally means like take the strength of your opponent and just kind
judo.
of flip it. And that is kind of a slight interpretation of this neural opportunity to have your brain tell a story from someone else's perspective and hear it. In a way, the weakness of our brain is that we cannot get ourselves from our own brain, right? AI can learn to play games because it can make a chess move and then it can turn the chessboard to the other side and make the contrary move. And in a way, it keeps like playing as if it doesn't know what the other side is doing. If you try to play against yourself, you would not be able to, because you know your strategy, so you can't like flip it and not know what's going to happen.
Right.
We can't. If we could, then we don't even need the other person. But we have to kind of, our brain knows what we're thinking. We have to project outside, see it from different person's perspective, and then we can solve it.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, right? To be able to get beyond what your current confines of what you're thinking and to be able to see it from a different perspective. But I think for me, the takeaway there is like, don't be afraid to feel the emotions of nervousness or fear. You just have to learn how to transform it to something else. What's another one that, we talked about feeling nervous, fear, and transforming that into excitement. What's another one?
Relabeling is one. We spoke about talking through a second person, having them kind of inject ideas. There are more kind of concrete ones that are known, that are kind of exposure, where you vary the exposure to the thing that is kind of debilitating for you, and you do it step by step. This is kind of classical kind of behavioral therapy, where you're afraid of spiders. So we show you first a picture, and then we show you a dead one, and then we show you a living one, but in a cage. But actually what's happening in those steps, which is something you can replicate without those things, is that if you can understand what's the ladder of exposures from the feeling that you can't withstand to the one that you're feeling okay with, you can control and regulate kind of the scale. So you're getting nervous every time you take an exam, and you fail not because you don't know the material, just because something about the exam is terrible for you. So you want to regulate those emotions. You want to kind of say, okay, how do I kind of do that? So what you can do is you can say, okay, let's break from at home when I'm perfectly okay with the material to at the exam room where I'm totally failing. What could be like 5 different things in between? It would be versions of exam, light, lighter, lightest, and real world. And then you say, okay, you know what? One thing would be that I take at home an exam and I replicate a condition. So it's still like kind of nothing else other than the paper and the pencil, no phones, no friends, but it's still at home. And that is like an exam, but at home. And how well do I do then? Step 2, an exam on something that I know perfectly well, like 2 years ago's material. Take an exam. So I know that I'm going to ace it, but now I'm still in an exam room. And you kind of build, and for every condition that is difficult for us, we can invent a 5-scale kind of version of that and take them one step at a time and train our brain to respond to those step by step.
Right. Yeah, it's powerful. Is there any studies done that you're aware of where you can obviously play around and regulate your emotions using your physical body? So for example, like there's been studies where if you show yourself doing a power pose, or if you're doing an interview and you're nervous, like taking up much space and putting your arms behind your back and, kind of the power poses, they're actually beneficial. It actually affects the way you feel in terms of confidence and boldness, so that when you get to the interview, it actually does affect you. Are there anything that you can?
There's a body of kind of work in neuroscience and psychology in this sphere. They call it, if someone wants to kind of look and dive deep into it, they call it embodied cognition. That's the name of the space. And what it says is that something about your physicality can leak into your thinking. Embodied cognition. And the classical examples show, for instance, the heaviness of the paper you hold in your hand when you write leaks into the heaviness of the words you use to write the essay. Like you write, you hold a thick kind of block of paper and you write, you would use bigger and more kind of profound words. You give you like a little piece of paper, you just kind of write a simple one. The classical example was a study, that the first one I think was a study where people were invited to the lab. Someone shook their hand, gave them a cup of tea, had them sit down, and they were asked to write for 10 minutes an essay about their mothers. Write something about your mom. So people write an essay. And then people took the essays and had them scored by how warm and nice it is towards mom versus nasty. And basically broke down to 2 piles. One were people who wrote really mean things about their mom, kind of, she's responsible for all my flaws and so on. And some people wrote, I'm so thankful and appreciative of her and so on. So people kind of were broken into 2 groups. And then they realized that what determines more than anything, if you fall in the first group or the second group, is the tea that you received when you entered. Half the people received iced tea, and they were asked to hold it in their hand while they write. And half received hot tea. And turns out that if you're feeling warm in your body and it's kind of like leaking from the tea, you manifest warmer and nicer thoughts that are in you. So most people have both of those thoughts. They have the entire repertoire, positive and negative things. But if you're feeling warm, it kind of makes your brain focus on the warmest and nicest thing, and you write those. And if you're feeling cold and more kind of hostile, you end up manifesting the negative ones. So this is one study of many now, and the list is long, of things that I can do to your body that will end up in the real world as a cognitive experience. And of course, if you ask people, why did you write what you wrote? They wouldn't say, oh, you gave me hot tea, so I wrote mean things or nice things. Like they would think this is what they have. And that's like the heaviness of the paper, the hotness of the tea, the chair, like we're sitting right now, same height, but if my chair was much higher than yours, it would actually leak into the feeling of power. I would be more powerful and you would be less powerful in our conversation.
I know show hosts that do that, by the way.
Really?
It's a very popular one.
Politicians do that. So there are many, and CEOs of companies, there are many kind of companies that sit in the boardroom. They put the CEO in a different, bigger and higher chair to kind of leak into that. During the debates a few months ago between politicians, Biden and Trump, there was an entire argument between the teams of Trump and Biden on what would be the temperature in the room. We don't see it because we see it on TV, but turns out the temperature in the room makes one candidate more aggressive and more kind of hostile and one more. And they wanted to kind of find a balance that would make their candidate manifest whatever they thought is the right mood that they have. So the temperature, the height, the weight, all of those things end up leaking. Now, it's not that you're going to write something that doesn't exist about your mom. You're not going to make up bad things about her. But since you have all those things in our mind, the body allows us to manifest some.
What would the temperature difference be? So if it's colder, are you saying it's going to affect each person differently? Or is it if it's colder, people are going to be less aggressive maybe? So you
generally it's the opposite. I think that the colder it is, it makes people be more angry and more assertive and more militant and a little bit more kind of hostile. And I think that the Trump team thought that he comes across stronger and better when it's cold. And he wears a very warm outfit anyhow. So they also wanted him not to sweat or something.
He's got the hair also to keep him warm.
the idea of that. And I think the Biden team said like his kind of strength would be being calm and not so if you make it colder, like now he becomes more aggressive and so on and counter to what they want. So they were arguing on like, what's the right temperature that would actually balance between the two teams? And that's something we don't really notice when we watch the debate, but the teams that know about embodied cognition say, if one more thing we can get an advantage in, why not argue for that? And they kind of argue for that as well.
Fascinating. Wow. So first of all, I messed up by getting you cold water. I should have gotten you some tea. First mistake right there. What about smell in terms of how you can, I know you did a study on this as well, but just in terms of persuasion and helping influence the way someone might think about you from, let's say, a professional perspective or even a business or even relationship wise in terms of attracting.
So much to say.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me the good stuff.
I'll give you a lot and stop me when you're done because there's smelling dating, smelling relationships, smelling trust, smelling.
Keep going. I'm fascinated about this stuff.
So generally we know that smells are a really important sense and we tend to overlook that. In surveys, if you ask people kind of which scent they want to give up if they had to, smell goes right away. We think that vision is the most important, and it's probably true that humans' vision is critical. 20% of our brain is vision, but smells for all other animals is the most important one. All animals use smell more than anything else. We're the only animal that kind of thinks that it doesn't need it. Right. And partially it's because the smells are down on the ground and our noses are up. Like when we learn to walk on two legs, we also get farther from smells. And so we're less reliant on them, but they're still very important.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
So that's kind of why we're now. That said, they're extremely important, and they're important in so many dimensions that I can just give you a few to kind of highlight. First of all, we know that smells. I would say not smells, but odors. Like the molecules that go into our nose, sometimes they have no smell. Like we don't smell them, but they impact us. For example, they're extremely important in choosing mate. There's a study by a friend of mine where he brought people to the lab for a smell study, and they go to the kind of waiting room and someone shakes their hand, gives them a cup of tea, has them sit down like before, tells them, wait here, we're going to call you in a few minutes to start the study. And then they leave the room. The person stays there and waits. Now, in reality, the study already began because the study is what happens in the 5 minutes they're waiting. And what happens is that most people, they take the hand that the person shook when they entered and they bring it kind of close to their nose. They do something like this. If you shake my hands now, in the next 5 minutes, without you noticing, it's going to happen. You're going to do something like this.
Right.
And what happens is that you don't really smell your hand, but you basically a little bit sniff the mix of my scent and your scent mixed on your body. And basically what your brain is measuring is what we call histocompatibility.
Right. Is this MHC, a major histocompatibility or something like that?
You basically measure, will you and I be great parents?
Right.
And all you do for that is you say, how is his smell, my smell, feel when they're mixed. And your brain knows how to interpret that. So you go to a room, someone shakes your hand, and after 5 minutes, you kind of, in the back of your mind, say, there's something about this dude that I like. And they did it in a extremely controlled way. Like they had, sometimes the person who shakes your hand shakes your other hand, and they saw that whatever hand was shaken is the one that gets close to the nose. They had gay men, gay women, straight. So they check, basically, if you're gay and I shake your hand, then you will look at it. But if a woman shakes your hand, you would not. So they really try to see all and they even had one version where a person comes and shakes your hand, but they have glove on their hand. So there's no, and then people don't do it. They really showed that it's happening every time someone that you find attractive shakes your hand. You bring the hand to your nose within 5 minutes to see if you're compatible.
So what was how do you measure that? Was it that the people that were potentially compatible, they shook their hand, and then did they rate how attractive that person was after the study?
Step one is they just put a camera and they measured how of the, let's say 100 people in the room, how many of them bring the hand that was shaken to the nose within less than 5 minutes? And this was overwhelming. So most people shake their hand, and then someone leaves the room and they do something like this. So they kind of have a little map, kind of heat map that shows how close was the shaken hand to the nose. And they show that it's happening to almost exclusively the people who find the other person attractive. And so that's step one. They just show that it happened. And then they started to do all kinds of fancy stuff. Like, for instance, they asked, I'm kind of making up half of it because I don't remember the details, but something like they asked you and your girlfriend to not shower for a week and wear the same outfits for the week, and then bring the outfits, and they cut the outfit to pieces and put it in a bottle, and they basically distill the smell of your outfit and of her outfit. And then they brought a lineup of like 20 other dudes who did the same thing, and they put the jars with all the smells, and they had your partner smell all 20, not even knowing what's going on, and pick the one that smells the best and rank them. And it's basically your boyfriend's number 1, the person closest to him is number 2, up to 20. So they show that really we have a clear scent kind of a cognition for our partner that develops, even though we don't know it. I'll give you another one to give you, and I'll say, by the way, that for women who are listening to us right now, this is one of the first things that is dead when you get pregnant. So when you get pregnant, one of the things that you lose quickly is the ability to tell whether the smell of your partner is good or bad for you.
Why is that?
It's a mechanism that biology created, because now you're basically locked with this guy. You're already pregnant. Now it's too late. So the biology doesn't want you to now start questioning it. So one of the things that cuts down in more than just humans, many animals, is the ability to kind of now find the other person not attractive smell-wise. You kind of lose this thing. And the funny thing that I think is like a good advice for your listener, taking the pill basically simulates pregnancy for the body. So it makes women lose this. So if you're dating a guy and you're on the pill and you kind of like this guy and you think maybe he's the one, my advice is stop taking the pill for like 2 months, let your body go back to his normal thing, then smell the dude. And if you still like his smell, he's really the guy. Because when you're in a pill, you don't smell him well. Like it's like your body simulates pregnancy.
I've heard this though. Girls that get off the pill after a while, they do find some attraction. It's a different level of attraction. Is it purely because of the smell?
There must be other things that build on that, hormones, but smell is really, really critical, because basically a lot of the processing of smell happens through bacteria in our gut that knows how to break all the binding things and make sense of that. And these bacteria change based on what we eat, what we experience, and so on. So it's not kind of unplausible that if you fall in love with a girl, it's not really you falling in love with her, it's the bacteria in your gut falling in love with the bacteria in her gut, and like telling you to, like as puppeteers, like, hey, we want the bacteria from her kind of in us, so kind of make it happen.
Wait, so is it vice versa? If the girl gets off of the birth control pill, do we, as guys, potentially smell her differently as well? Now
to guys. So we spoke about girls, now to guys. Turns out guys' sense of smell oscillates with women's menstruation. So there's a classical study. I again would only remember some details, but butcher other, where they took, they measured the amount of money people give strippers in a strip club. Like how much money how many $20 bill they give. And they saw that they get tips proportional to when they are in a menstrual cycle, like in the window of time where they ovulate, and they're more likely to basically get pregnant. Men, again, without smelling it, it's like odor. It's not really a smell. You don't know, she's ovulating right now. The body emits a lot of kind of things that make you find her more arousing and attractive, and you give her more money. So they really showed nicely that men are kind of every month they are a little bit more attracted to women that are able to get pregnant.
Wow.
So I gave you a few. There are so many. I give you one more that's cool, and you can tell me if you want more because it's endless. But here's one that I love that's very interesting. There was a question among scientists for a while. What's the purpose of tears? So humans, when they are sad, they cry, and the human cry is also accompanied by water coming out of your eye. Now, all animals have water in the eye. It's cleaning the lens, but only several organisms and humans primarily actually cry with water coming out. It's a question, what is it for? Like, you're not cleaning the lens. Like, what's the purpose of tears? And there are many hypotheses, and one that is now really, really popular is that tears actually carry odor in them that gets spread when you cry to about 11 feet from radius from you, and whoever is in this radius inhales the odor, and this odor goes to the brain and makes your testosterone level go down by 80%. So basically, you're aggressive towards a woman, you're kind of screaming at her, you have a big kind of fight, she starts crying. The tears signal to your brain to calm down, and without knowing why, you're a lot calmer, a lot more empathetic, a lot more nice, not because you decided, okay, like you're shocked, the tears actually make you. And it's true for men and women, but kind of the study was mainly on men as the aggressor and women as the crier. And they did it in a really nice way. They asked women to cry, collect their tears, brought the tears to a lab, released them in front of men, and they measured testosterone before and after, and they showed that the tears really are the vehicle to deliver this odor that says, be less aggressive next to me.
What's the evolutionary biological reason for that? Because how does that help us survive?
So first of all, as a society, it helps us get closer to, more empathetic.
Right.
And we need to have something to kind of stop escalation, right? Like if you think of two women, one with this mechanism, one without, one starts an argument with another tribe, another person, and it just escalates and it gets to war and maybe she doesn't survive. And one has this mechanism that when it gets very aggressive and very hostile, she can turn on this magical switch that just makes everyone less violent. How great it is, right? Like you're at war and you can make all the enemies in like one switch less aggressive. Magical weapon that makes everyone less likely to die.
It's magic.
Yeah.
It's magic. So this isn't just your tears as a man that you're smelling your own tears. Yeah. This is anyone's tears that is surrounding you. It just naturally, and that lowers your testosterone. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And men have higher testosterone than women, so it's kind of more pronounced in men, but it's true for anyone. Anyone in the radius next to a crying person is less aggressive and more empathetic and kind of loving towards them.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay.
So you see, there's so much on smell, from dating to pregnancies to tips and strip clubs.
Yeah.
I think that to me, it boils down to the odors are a way for our bodies to signal things that's not transparent. We don't really notice it. We don't really say, oh, wait, this is what's happening right now. But the body, clandestine, like under the hood, figures it out and knows what to make of that.
Yeah, and it's kind of subconsciously done because we're just visual characters. We don't know that the smells are affecting the way we do, so we don't really think about it consciously or talk about it.
Actually, so this is the first time we're in the same room.
Yeah.
So now there's some odor exchange that happens here.
Yeah. You
probably have a little bit different perspective on me now, seeing me and smelling me and sharing the same environment than we ever had in any podcast. If you go on a date, like you can get a lot from like the picture and the bio on the phone, but there's something entirely different when you're in the room with them. So in that sense, it's like an argument for working in the office and meeting people in real life.
It's so funny because so many people, they talk about that, right? They're like, I need to meet them in person. And certainly it's not all about smell, but they talk about the vibe that you feel about someone, right? And it's this abstract thing. How do you describe the vibe? But it's probably a big portion of it is their smell.
Yeah, there's smell. There's like, you experience the world in the same way. So kind of at home, they're in their comfort zone, you're in your comfort zone. You can't really get them out of their comfort zone. So a neutral place makes everyone behave a little bit different, and it reveals a little more of their personality. Like you see them outside of the environment that is the most comfortable for them, which is another kind of advantage. You learn more about them.
Right.
There are also surprises, right? Like when you're in a place together, you're kind of, it's simultaneous and live. If something happens, it happens to the two of you, and knowing this thing makes your senses work a little bit different. It's like the difference between theater and movies. Something about being in a theater, when in theory you know that today could be the moment where something else is going to happen, make the entire experience different. Everyone in the audience feels different when they watch a movie versus theater.
True.
Because you know that if someone now stands up and starts screaming, then the play is going to go kind of somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that knowledge, even if it doesn't happen, makes the entire experience a little bit more alert. And that's true for a date, true for many other things. We experience it differently.
So this major histocompatibility complex, a hard word to say, what I've read about it says a lot about like you want a different MHC from someone else because it talks about, it signals someone's immunity system and how strong it is. Can you explain that a little bit? Like what's the biology behind that or chemistry?
The simplest way of saying that is diversity in biology is great because your body comes equipped with a lot of things it knows how to withstand, immune to, but it's not the same for everyone. Everyone has a little bit of different. What you want is to take a person who is immune to, let's say there's 100 diseases in the world, you're immune to 50 of them, and there's another person who's immune to the other 50. You're going to be a perfect match. Together, you're going to create an offspring that's immune to all 100. So in a way, what it is your body knows kind of what are the things that you're able to withstand, what are your 50 immune systems kind of calibrated defenses. And when you smell someone else or rub your hands or do something else, your body basically does kind of a mix and match and says, okay, how many of the chemicals that I just inherited from the other person I'm familiar with? Very few of them. It means that they have an entirely different repertoire and dictionary of kind of thing. Let's bring them into our life. Probably we're going to have great offsprings. If it's the same, you're familiar with all of them, you say, okay, I kind of know what they know. We're both immune to A, B, and C. Still, maybe I like them, but it's not going to be a survival thing. And if you think of humanity as like a pure evolutionary thing that tries to survive the most survivability comes from taking two very different entities and mixing them.
Right. I don't know if you probably heard about this study as well, but there's one that was done with T-shirts where I think it was females or males. One of them, I think it was females, were put into a room and they were told to smell the T-shirts of sweaty men or something. Can you explain that a little bit? Because that's the most fascinating.
It's almost the same version of the one we kind of said with the T-shirt of your boyfriend. Right. It's just that now the question is you don't have a boyfriend. Right. You just have 20 men and you have to smell their T-shirts that they wore for like a week without bathing and so on. And then we ask which one do you find most compelling? And your brain finds the most compelling, the one that has the chemicals that are immune to the most different diseases than you. So it basically says the same thing. You're going to find more attractive a person who, together with you, will create an offspring that's immune to more diseases.
So I'm curious because most of us wear either cologne, perfume. There's so many artificial smells that cover our natural scent. Is that even a good thing then? If we're trying to find the love of our lives and we're putting on scent that might actually detract them, maybe that's not the smell they're attracted to. I mean, how do you talk about this when you're trying to like find a romantic partner, you're on a first date and you trying to put on your best scent? Is there like a neutral scent that is like a good scent for everyone? Should you not put any scent on?
So I'll say two things. First of all, the industry, the perfume industry, companies like, they're big ones who kind of there are a few companies basically make the perfume for all the brands like whatever brand you got, they all come from like the same manufacturer in New Jersey that actually makes the chemicals. So you buy L'Oreal or Chanel or Prada and so on. At the end of the day,
it's the same one,
they go
just a different brand.
One or two companies. There's like 5 companies. I don't want to do promotion, but if you look them up, you'll find there's like 5 companies. Many of them are in New Jersey, where if you walk in this warehouse, you basically see kind of a long hallway and there's a jar that says Prada, Chanel 5, and basically all of them go to the same one. 5 chemicals. But what I was going to say is the chemists who do that, they by now know so much about the brain that they start putting the right odors in them. So you can actually say as a manufacturer, you say, make me a perfume that won't just smell good, but has some kind of this particular molecule that I know makes women more attracted to men, and they start to play with you by doing just that. We still haven't found the pheromones they called the kind of the magic pheromones that really control that. For bees and for ants, and we actually know them. So we can actually take a little frog and spray a smell in the room that will make this frog horny. We know exactly what are the pheromones that activate this desire in many animals, rats and mice and cats and so on. In humans, we know that there are only several pheromones that actually activate the brain, but we don't know if they do the same thing that is done with rats, and they have no smell. So if I spray this thing, your brain will respond to it, but you won't say, roses or lemon. It doesn't have any smell. But because we know that they penetrate your brain and they don't do anything bad and maybe something good, now companies just inject them into everything. So whatever perfume you buy has this in, and some would even claim that they know that it works, but this would be kind of like questionable. Some company would say, yeah, we put more of the pheromone C4HMOA, which we know makes women attracted to you. And that's probably a little bit of a snake oil. But maybe there's no something, I don't know. But like they definitely play and try with that. And they do focus group where they bring women and say there's 5 different things that smell the same, but one has extra thing that you don't smell but is there. And they say, hey, if many women say this is the one, then they would say, see, we proved, and they try to sell it to. Either way, there's an attempt by a lot of chemists to kind of try to help men and women do that. And then there's a movement, the other side, that says, no, go natural. And see what it is. But then still the question is, and this is the second point, what is natural? So you have a variety of smells. Like there's a smell when you wake up in the morning, and there's a smell after the shower, and there's a smell after you ran and exercise. So, and in a way, the question to ask is kind of, if I'm going on a date, should I come as sweaty as possible so my smell is going to be the most, and she would really, if she likes that, then sure.
Yeah, it's kind of it's kind of a grenade bomb though. It's like it's going to work really well, or that's your first and only date.
So the alternative, which is kind of what a lot of people, it's going to sound trivial, but actually is the case, is go to 5 dates. If you go to enough dates, you'll get enough variety that will tell you, and I'm going to be a little bit more vulgar, but say like having sex with someone releases a lot more smells than you would ever get when you have a date with them. It's like a lot more animalistic and passionate, but also a lot more sweaty and a lot more close. Like you really get to smell all of their body. So there are things that you experience that if you go to say 5 dates, you really would know them. And if you find them attractive and desirable and like kind of so passionate that you can't withstand them, it's probably you got enough of the kind of options to know that it really is true.
Right. Aren't there just known, like, let's say aphrodisiacs though, that are kind of the mainstream, like people know about, or is that all kind of BS, like chocolates or roses,
so
vanilla?
It's based on something, but I'll give you an example in a second if you want. But by now also we concentrate psychology. Like we know that, right? So you know now that roses are romantic. Yeah. So if a girl comes and brings you roses, it now turns on so many cells in the brain, not because just the smell purely activates, like it's also, there's a history and you're human and you know that this meant that she made an effort and signaled that she's interested in someone. But I'll give you an example that I like that is kind of, there's a question that is long asked, which is why the sunset is romantic. So people know that if you and your girlfriend go and sit by the sunset, it's a romantic thing, but why? And turns out there are, again, explanations that go from like historically we know it's romantic, so now when we do it we feel romantic, but there are also biological and physical one. And here's the physical one. If you look at the human eye basically has a lens and it has 2 muscles in the top and the bottom that kind of make the eye contract and expand. And essentially when the muscles are very, very kind of, when they work very, very hard, the lens become almost round and the focus is very near. So you can read a newspaper from like 20 inch from your eye. And if the muscles are relaxed, the lens is very, very flat, and then the focus is very, very far, and then you can see far into the horizon and still it's in focus. And when you're a baby, in the first few weeks of your life, you learn to control the lens perfectly, such that when you saccade, when you move your eyes from here to there, while you saccade, your muscles change their position. So when you get to the other destination, it's already in focus. As a baby, things are out of focus, but you quickly learn how to control the lens, and most times things are in focus. Now, there are 2 extreme cases. One is when you try to read something from nearby, and one you try to look at far horizon. So if you try to, say, read a newspaper from like, we said 20 inches, so let's keep it 20 inches, very, very close to your eye. The muscles have to work very hard to keep the lens round. You try to read. After a few minutes, the muscles basically tell the brain, we're working very, very hard. We don't like this thing. Can you stop this? And the brain responds by giving you a headache. which is a signal to you, stop doing what you're doing. So you read a new paper from nearby. After a few minutes, the brain says, I don't like this thing, stop, and you take it away and it stops. The contrary example is when you go to sleep. You go to sleep, your eyelids are entirely shut, the muscles are fully relaxed. They tell the brain after not moving for like a few minutes, they tell the brain, I guess we're trying to fall asleep. Brain release all the hormones that make the person fall asleep, help them kind of relax. There are a few moments that are in between. One of them is sunset. You go with your girlfriend, you sit and look at the sunset. For about 5 minutes, your eyes are open, but the muscles are entirely relaxed because you're looking at the far infinity. And the muscles tell the brain, we've been not moving for the last 5 minutes. I guess the person is trying to fall asleep. Release all the hormones that make them feel relaxed. Now you're not sleeping, your eyes are open, but the brain releases all the hormones that make you feel good in your body. And you tell yourself, oh, I must really like this woman. I feel so comfortable and nice, but it's really all physics.
Wow. So it's not just like the beauty of the sunset. There's actual like brain chemistry that's happening that triggers
muscles in the eye tell the brain, love this woman. And of course, you had to choose a person to go with and you had to give them the 5 minutes of looking at the horizon. There are things that you did to help them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the feeling that you feel in your body that says, oh, I must really like them. It feels so good. All physics.
Wow. So you combine like the smell, the roses and all these things. It's no wonder it works, right?
Yes.
So that's really on the romantic side of smell. I want to shift to persuasion a little bit, and we can stick to smell. We can talk about something else. You have a book called Consumer Neuroscience, I believe that's what it's called. You talk a lot about how, number one, how we're also persuaded, but about things that we don't even know about, like smell. But how can we also be more persuasive? So what are some of the things that you've learned that we can be more persuasive to influence other people's in business or even in relationships that we currently have?
So there's a list of things we can do to change behavior. This is kind of the title. You have a behavior that I don't like, and I want to change your behavior. There's a list of things that go there. And I'll give you two. Extreme one, and start with a more modest one, and then we go to extreme one. A modest one is there's something that's known in the persuasion literature called the overtone window, which basically says if you take any topic of debate, you can kind of create a scale that goes from one extreme to the other extreme and see where people stand. So I don't know, think of should there be bicycle lanes in New York? Okay, there's one extreme that says there should only be bicycle lanes in New York. Shouldn't be any cars in New York, only bicycle. That's one extreme. And people who believe that would have argument that it's climate great and no accidents and so on, and it's much more efficient and so on. That's one extreme. On the other extreme, the people would say no bicycles are allowed in New York. It's a small city. Cars move much faster. The bicycles are creating more opportunities for accidents because they kind of go between cars. And anyhow, we can do a lot more kind of in the city by moving fast. It's a bigger city than you think and so on. Those are two extremes. Most people don't sit either here or here. There's something in between. But if you think of this as, let's say, 1 to 10 scale, you can kind of think this is 10, this is 1. You can ask people a few questions and figure out where they sit, and they maybe are at 4. Okay? Let's say Sean is at 4. What we teach in the business school is that the best way to move you towards a 10 isn't to try to convince you of 10. Say, okay, let me give you all the arguments for 10. It's to ask questions about 4, find one questions to which you don't have a good answer, and then leave it there. And then presumably with that open moment, your brain is going to try to fill the gap. And typically what it's going to fill the gap is with something that's going to move you to 5. So the best I can do is in conversation number 1, ask questions that kind of challenge the belief you have, but don't give you any answer. I just kind of ask, so you think that bicycles are faster than cars always? Do you think that bicycles are cheaper than cars? Do you think, and I kind of ask questions, and at some point I'm going to stumble on one question that you don't have the answer to, and actually would baffle you, and then I leave. I say, I don't know the answer, I'm just asking, and you leave. And that person would stick with the idea in their brain. Not having an answer makes the brain fill the gap, and typically it will fill the gap towards 5. And that's it. Tomorrow you're going to be a 5. You're not a 10, but then if I let you kind of simmer in 5 for like a few days, come back again, ask you again questions, I can get to a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it will be multiple steps to get you there, but every time posing questions with no answer that make you challenge your own beliefs, and then leaving would make you move yourself.
And how do you ask questions, or how do you know that person's not going to go towards one or the other way?
So the question you ask should challenge the belief that they have. So if you believe that should be more cars, you ask a question like, you always believe that bicycles are better than cars. Are you sure that they're faster than cars? Are you sure that, so you kind of, so you have to ask questions that the answer to kind of challenges their own belief. If you ask questions like, do you know why bicycles are the greenest thing ever? Then you kind of help them go the other direction. But if you ask questions that kind of compare the desired outcome to where they are right now, unanswered room will make their brain fill the gap, typically by a little bit move to the other direction.
Right.
That's not extreme version. It's slow process, but that is a process that seems to work very, very well if you have enough time. If my job is to convince you you're a climate denier, I'm a climate believer, I want to move you. If I try to kind of convince you that climate is a big risk and you're on the other side, my attack on your identity will only make you stick closer to your
People
identity.
are not.
If I ask questions without anything that's just going to make you challenge your belief and I leave, you will make a small step and enough iterations will get you far. That's not extreme. Now extreme. Extreme one that was tried by a colleague of mine that don't try this at home, but actually seems to work very, very well. It's along the same lines, but it's a lot more extreme, is to make you defend the extreme version of your own belief. So here's what I mean by that. I'm Israeli. Right now, there's a war in Israel that makes most Israelis and Palestinians become more extreme.
Yeah.
The Israelis become a lot more right-wing, a lot more kind of calling, and the Palestinians become a lot more hateful of Israel. Both sides went from like wherever close they were to farther apart. So this colleague of mine did this study that asked this very question. He brought only Israelis to the lab and ran a survey where he basically asked them questions about what should be the solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And people answered a lot of questions. The left-wing people said peace, two-state solution, finding a way to kind of reconcile. That's one. Some people said there needs to be kind of balance, the UN should be in between and no one should stay like that. And some people, the extreme right people, said something along the lines, we should deport them all from the country, transfer them all, kill them all, something more extreme. Okay, so you had distribution, and then he brought back only the extreme people. Those who, in this case, were the right-wing people who basically came up with genocide. Okay,
Right.
as
they were against.
Yeah, they said, like, let's kill them all.
That, yeah.
Like this. He brought those people. And then he said, I wish I could convince those people to be less extreme. And what he did is he said something like this. He said, okay, so Sean, we really appreciate you came last week and you answered the survey. And we asked you what should be the solution and you said we should kill them all. And it's interesting. We had a lot of people who gave a lot more modest and a lot more calm. Yours stood out in a very interesting way. We didn't think about it. Can you elaborate? So we want to know, because it's a really clever solution. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah.
And then you say, how do you want to kill them? Do you think we should shoot them all, or maybe bomb them, or maybe we should guillotine them? So you kind of ask them, and then the person who basically, he said that because he's angry and he's like a war state and so on. He said, like, let's kill them all. But when you ask him, okay, do you think we should stab them or with the baby? What do you do with babies? Should we chop the babies? Like, you basically confront them with the ideas. By the end of this thing, the person kind of says, wait, and they start working. I said, oh, I actually didn't mean to kill them all. I was more kind of thinking that we should end. They basically, when you face them with the kind of consequence of what they said, and you really ask them to go in details, like, explain to me exactly the babies. How do you want to kill the babies? And like, people get shocked, and they say, oh wait, I don't. And then by the time the session is over, they say, I didn't mean it. What I meant it. And they basically move from like the 10 that they were to 6 in a much faster kind of jump, because they realize that what they said is insane. And they only said it in anger, and they had to kind of now rationalize the anger, realizing it's not true.
Right.
That's extreme. I don't recommend trying that, but it works in a very, very powerful way in taking a person who's, a climate denier who says the weather is controlled by people who make it a hurricane and so on. You say, okay, when they control the weather, do you think they do it only to Republicans, or they try to do it also? Because what if it's a Democrat and they kill him with how they control the weather? How do you think they feel about it? And suddenly you can say, oh wait, I guess they don't control the weather. It doesn't make sense, and so on. So they kind of walk back.
I mean, that says a lot about how deep thinkers are, how deeply people actually think about the problem. It just shows that people don't actually think about what they're saying. It's much easier to verbalize something without actually having thought deeply about it.
I think most people who have an opinion on things, especially things that are very scientific, like climate and so on, they don't really study climate. They just have an opinion that they don't like the left and they don't like, I don't know, Kamala Harris.
Right.
And this manifests in, okay, like everything that they stand for, I must not agree with, and they kind of walk. And I think it's true for the right and the left. So this is not like a left-wing or right-wing thing. This is opinion thing, and politics definitely makes it more extreme. In politics, the other side is everything you don't like, and you have to hate everything. So you might kind of say, objectively, if I ask you about 10 different things, you have one opinion that you like, one you don't like. But if I tell you the other side holds all of those 5 opinions, then you don't like all of them. And you have to be a climate denier, and you have to be fiscal irresponsible or responsible, or big government or small government. You kind of have to say, this is the other side's opinion. I'm on my side, so everything they say is wrong. And boom, you're kind of locked in something you don't believe in, but you've locked in it.
That's interesting, because I think people think about persuasion as like kind of tricking people, or thinking about like saying the right things at the right time and all that stuff. But what you're saying is it just comes down to asking the right questions and pointing the questions in the right way to help the other person realize or persuade themselves out of whatever their decisions that they were making.
I think that generally what marketing people would tell you is that there's very little success in new information. So if I create batteries and you have competing batteries, and I'll try to tell you in 10 different ways that my batteries last longer and they're cheaper and so on, it's going to be a lot less powerful than if I kind of make you try 2 batteries and you discover yourself that these are better and you did it. So the best I can do if I'm in marketing is somehow make you try, make you play, make you participate, but really learn yourself. Because if it's coming from me, your defenses are automatically saying there must be a trick here. Don't let it in. Don't believe.
Yeah.
And you're kind of hostile to my attempts.
Can you apply this to negotiation as well? So let's say I have a client and I want to charge $10,000 for, construction company, whatever it might be, or a freelance design service, but the client only wants to pay $5,000. Can you use that somehow, and how can you apply that to the context of negotiation?
So first of all, in negotiations, we teach an entire class at Columbia on negotiation. It has many tactics, but I would say there are a few kind of classic kind of tactics that we say. Step 1, we say, similar to what I said about persuasion before, the best tactics for negotiation begin with information gathering. So you ask questions.
Questions again, okay.
Yes. So if you come to buy a car, there are a list of things that are important for the car dealer. And maybe for you, it's the price. But for them, maybe they need to sell a lot of cars because it's December 31st, and if they get to the end of the year, they get a big bonus from the kind of car manufacturer. So they need to sell a car, and they don't mind losing money today, but they did mind losing money a week ago. So knowing all the parameters is critical, and which is why in most negotiation we say, before you start talking about kind of the moving kind of the needle, ask a lot of questions to understand what are the 20 different parameters the other person thinks about. It's common to think about negotiation as just like one thing that you argue on, the price, let's say. But many times there are like deals. There's like, you care about the price, they care about the price as well, but they can get a lot better deal if you buy 2 and you bring your friend and you can say, look, I'm going to buy a car for less money, but I'm going to get 5 of my friends and they're going to buy, and you in the end will sell 5 cars. And so those type of things are the best start. And I would say spend as much time as you can on learning whatever the other side is willing to disclose on their thinking. That's 1. Step 2, we always say, try to see if you can grow the pie. So we think of it as like basically a zero-sum game, right? Like every $1,000 that I take from you, you give up, I gain. But maybe there's a way that we kind of do something that makes both of us get more money. And then the $1,000 are, yes, you give $10,000 go to me, but the pie is much bigger and you have a chance of making a lot more money from the joint thing. We kind of talk about that. And we say at least step 1, explore that. So far I didn't give you anything that kind of says, hey, how do I make the other side kind of give in to my attempts and just move on? But we kind of climbing towards that. Then the third thing we kind of say is oftentimes it's useful to remove barriers in terms of like communication. So many times in divorce, you have me, my lawyer, your lawyer, you. And those kind of channels of communication, they aren't just they cost money, they also filter information differently, and they might not have the same incentives as you are. So it's sometimes advisable to have like a lawyer because you don't know the law and so on. But if there are 5 lawyers between you and the other person, ideally remove as many barriers as possible so you can get better sense of the other person. And kind of when you start moving the needle, you have better sense of how kind of the needle actually is moved on both ends.
Yeah.
Then at the very end comes the part where there's really a zero-sum game. Happens many times and so on. Start, of course, by knowing kind of what's your bottom line and like what's your kind of that's useful to spend time thinking of negotiation. But then the key thing is personality. So the more
personality,
I know, So if I know your personality, there's a way to tailor the communication to kind of your personality. So for example, some people, myself for instance, are very analytical, and the best way to exchange with them is by talking Excel tables and Python codes, right? Like we think this way. I think that I work now on kind of nuclear preparedness with the US government. So I get to see different presidents. There are presidents who are like that. And if you're the enemy, if you're Putin and you're trying to negotiate with a US president, it's ideal for you to know that this president responds well to numbers and you can give them numbers, whereas that president responds well to stories. And so personalities could be some people who respond well to numbers, some people respond well to story. And if you just tell them, look, the reason I ask for this $1,000 isn't because I'm trying to, it's because my daughter is really sick and so on. And that you can meld them with that thing. And basically we have a list of the type of personalities that are out there. And if I can have clear understanding of your personality type, a story-driven person, an analytical person, a person that wants to win at all costs. So me taking away $1,000 feels like a loss. Is there a way for me to basically take the $1,000 and make you feel like you won? So if we know all those kind of character thing, we can essentially craft the argument around your personality, and this usually wins.
Yeah. I'm reading a good book about negotiation. It's called Power Negotiation, I think, or Power Persuasion, something like that. And number one, they said like never be the first one to say the price as well. But the key thing that I took away was no matter how great the deal is for yourself, never tell the other person that you won. You always want to make the other person felt like they win. And that really was like a hitter for me, because sometimes like you get a good price that you think is just like an immediate yes, and you think saying yes as fast as possible is doing them a service because you want to make it easy, you want to comply with it, you want to be nice. But sometimes it's like really making it seem like this is a very difficult decision for you. Maybe coming back like 24 hours later saying you have to talk to the team, or I got to talk to my wife or my husband. It's such a hard decision, but you know, I'll let you have this one. Like you have to really like force it out of you.
I would say feels like they won. That people are basically a mirror of you, right? Like that's kind of my one simplest lesson that I would teach if I were to teach negotiation class right now. If you're the kind of person who gets hurt when you ask for a salary and you get a yes, and all you do is tell yourself, oh, it means I would have gotten more and so on.
Yeah.
Then I think that it's useful to know that about yourself. When you're in the negotiations, the same way I said, like, know the other person, also know yourself. And it's easy to kind of tell what the other person is by asking a few questions. You say, this is the person that would feel terrible if they got the first thing. They need to, the thrill of the exchange. I was just traveling from Bhutan to the US, and I had a stop in India. That's the only way to get from Bhutan. You have to stop somewhere, either Thailand or India. And I went outside. I have like 9 hours to kill in India. So I traveled around and I went to the market, and it's common to go to the market and start negotiating on whatever you want to buy. Now, at the end of the day, the amount that you're negotiating is rupees, which would be like cents. So you want to buy a tomato and they say 20 rupees and you're supposed to say 10 rupees. And then they say, no, 15 rupees. And you kind of take the tomato for what would be 15 cents.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But it's like,
everybody knows it's okay, right?
That's the spot, and it's very lovely and very friendly and so on. And I decided, I said, since it's rupees and it's kind of very little money for me, I'll try to see if I can leave a mark on this person by doing the opposite. I'm going to negotiate up. So I go, and he kind of says 20% or 30. And you can see what? Like, it's like so I says 20, I said 30. He said, no, 15. He said, wait, what? No. And then he kind of raffled, and you can see that it's not something that he knows what to do with.
That's so
and then he
funny.
says, like, and then he knows, like, then you see, like, should he say 30 Or should you go up and whatever he went up, I kept going, but now it's with a smile. So now basically I said 30, he kind of confused and says,
he's like 20.
35. So no, 40. And then he smiles and basically we locked among us the rapport that we both knowing that it's a kind of a fun exchange. And then we went back in the end and closed on whatever he started with. But I think this thing changed the entire dynamic from, it's no longer like two sides. We're basically having fun with it.
Yeah.
And he knows, and I know that it's kind of a small amount for me and that he can afford anything.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not do that with your next business client where hundreds of thousands of dollars are on the line, but it's an interesting experiment. And there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but let's talk about, maybe we have to finish it off with this, but this falls in line of persuasion, but I think a lot of people, at the end of the day, we want to be liked more. You know, we want to be more likable. We want to leave a lasting impression in business or on a first date or people that we enjoy. What are some unusual hacks beyond, you know, dressing well, being polite, all that stuff that can help people like you more and leave a positive impression wherever you go? Something simple that people can do, you know, in their daily lives, like obviously warm tea instead of cold water. But
so I'll say one thing, an asterisk, that your character manifests in how you speak, and it's not obvious that you're right. As in, you said something that is clearly who you are. Everyone wants to be likable. It's not true for everyone. There are people who would say, "No, I don't want to be likable." So now I know who you are.
Fair enough.
Because most people, what they think everyone else is what they actually are. You are a person that's very likable and you want people to be likable, and it's manifest in how you ask questions and how you do business and so on. There's people who, there's a person who's watching us right now, say that's not me at all. I want to get whatever I want at the expense of being unlikable, totally okay. So now that we said that, let's say most people are like you and they want to be likable, and that's an important value for them. I'll say that kind of some of the research on that shows, first of all, that being vulnerable and being kind of transparent is very likable. People across the board, like even if they might not in the end, they might try to take advantage of that, they would leave liking you. So kind of you being transparent and vulnerable is very much likable. We all like babies, and they're the most transparent and most vulnerable. They kind of come built in with this.
Dogs as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So it kind of works. We can even try to explain why, but it works on us in a very kind of visceral way. And then another thing that works very, very powerfully is humor. So being humorous is it kind of breaks barriers. And again, we can explain why. But behind those, I think there are three things that everyone can do, right? Everyone can open by saying, it's important for me that you like me, which is why I'm going to do a lot of things in the conversation and know that I'm telling you that, and it makes me vulnerable because I think that it's going to help our negotiations go well. You just did that and the room dynamic changes. It's maybe not going to play out. Maybe the person is going to be a jerk and they won't, but I think you gave as much as you could to start this way. Yeah. And I think if they're a jerk, he would have been a jerk no matter what.
Maybe more of a jerk.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think this is a powerful tool that people don't try enough. I think it's scary, right? Like it's a lot more scary to put yourself out there in negotiations and on a date and on any meeting. It's the kind of thing that we learn to defend and guard the most. Try this once, twice, see if it pays off. And being humorous is very, very powerful. And I would say the best way to be humorous isn't necessarily to be the funny person, is to laugh from other people's jokes. So the easiest way to seem like you're funny is if you smile and laugh when other people are funny. And that's kind of a trick that anyone can do.
Right.
You don't have to be the smartest, funniest guy in the room, but you have to be the person that everyone feels. People think that when they tell a joke and someone is laughing, they love their joke much more. So it's kind of, it's a magical trick to be as easily as possible seemingly funny.
I heard something interesting about this because there's actually a difference of how men and women perceive that. So men like it when other people laugh at their jokes, whereas women, obviously it both apply for sure, but women like it when other people are funny. They don't care as much about them laughing at their jokes. And it's kind of the reverse for men. Men prefer it when other people laugh at their jokes more than women do. So
I think that generally there's something to kind of, so humor, why is it so powerful? It first of all diffuses animosity. Like it's almost, if you can take a situation and make people for a second laugh, you kind of change
the set.
When I teach a class and at some point I say something funny and the room laughs, the student in the back who was kind of looking at his email and raises their hand and kind of say, hey, what did I miss? Because somehow it's a signal that we all accept that if something makes a lot of people laugh, it's important for me to know. So I know that like a joke every 5 minutes will make all the people in the room with me. And then the biological mechanism behind that is to make you laugh. I have to do a really complex thing. I have to understand how you think. I have to basically penetrate your brain with my story and walk you in a journey by saying a lot of things that your brain processes, but I leave out the offensive thing or the difficult thing, and I make you somehow say it in your mind, and you feel uncomfortable with blondes are dumb. You said it. I didn't say it. I just told you a joke, and somehow the joke completes with your brain by saying the blonde woman did this because she's stupid. You say it. You realize that I made you think that, but I didn't say it. So you feel uncomfortable, but you feel comfortable twice. Like you said something fancy, mean, but also you realize that I control your brain. I somehow kind of manipulated you to think in this thought. The brain feels so uncomfortable that it kind of bursts in this discomfort manifested in laughter. So it's, at the end of the day, such a level of control to make you laugh that you and I recognize that I control your brain if I make you laugh. And this is a powerful thing that people really respect.
Yeah. And then never described it, humor in such a neuroscientist way, but that's why you're here.
Like, romance in a way, about dating, about like persuasion. Smells. Everything was broken down to cells firing in the brain.
I know. I had so much more to talk to you about, but I think we're running out of time here.
What's number 4?
Number 4 is coming soon. I had so many things that I want to talk to you about, but the smell one was so fascinating. Why don't we end it off here? I mean, what's like one kind of takeaway for you that can help people either be more persuasive, be more influential, be more likable? Any other kind of key things that we can leave people with?
Spend time knowing your preferences so that when people talk to you and talk to other people, you can separate what you like from what the world is. Most of us think that whatever we are is everyone. The best advice I could give couples, for instance, is don't assume that you think that A leads to B, B leads to C, then she must believe the same. Maybe she thinks that A leads to B and B leads to D. And for you, it's like inconceivable. If you learn that your thinking isn't correct, it's just A thinking, you'll be much more open to other people. You can be persuasive. You can be a better negotiator. You'll be a better boyfriend or husband or partner, and altogether more empathetic. And this is also kind of a side note, what will I think make the country much better, because right now we are very kind of locked in our thinking and think everyone else is just wrong if you don't think like us. If you say, I'm a thinking person, but not the thinking person, you'll be more open to other people and see the world from their perspective a little bit different.
Yeah, powerful way to end it. Moran, thanks so much for coming on the show again. Number
Lovely,
3.
Sean.
Perfect.